Hi guys, hello and welcome to another episode of the BashTalk podcast. This is the first time we're trying out the remote format, so just over Skype, and I've got a special guest today, and that is Dr. Naveed Bey. He's been very kind to take some of his really precious time out to just have a chat with me, and on behalf of all the people that had a lot of questions around this particular topic today, which is coronavirus and a lot of the myths around it. Now, I did do an episode at the beginning of my podcast series on episode 4, which is with a friend of Dr. Naveed's called Dr. Shabs. At that time, we did quite well with the video. And then ever since then, there's been all sorts of things that have happened. And it's been a bit of a roller coaster of lockdowns, half lockdowns, and so forth. And a lot's changed. So that's an opportunity just to get some up-to-date information. But before I start rambling, let's just start the ball rolling and just ask Dr. Naveed if you could just give us a quick introduction about yourself, or just even a brief bio, if you don't mind.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me on your show. I have subscribed and I am a fan, and it's really good to see what you're doing in the community, to have this dialogue going through social media. So yeah, I'm Naveed. I was actually born in Pakistan, and I was a year old when I came here about 40 years ago, and went through the school system and college. So spent most of my life in Nelson, apart from, say, about 9 to 10 years where I spent it in Manchester and traveling abroad to various humanitarian causes. I studied at Manchester Medical School. I came home regularly, which is the norm, especially if you're Asian. You keep that connection with your family. Maybe it's the food, I don't know. And each time when I qualified, I was working in various sort of refugee crises, such as in Greece, in the Middle East, like Lebanon around the Syrian border, in Jordan, Nepal earthquake, and so on. And that was how I balanced the two. I was originally started off training in emergency medicine, but the lifestyle was just not for me, and it was just too politicized. And then I left emergency medicine to pursue general practice. And this is where I found my niche. And for me, it's been the best decision ever, because it gives me that diversity to balance lots of medical issues at the same time looking at global issues as well. But in summary, I never really imagined or envisaged a problem in our own area, in our own country with this pandemic. And here I am.
And if you don't mind me asking, and the only reason I'm going to ask this is just so, because I've got multi-generational viewers and subscribers, just generally just to get a feel of what generation you are. But how old are you?
I'm 42. So yeah, that's I don't know what that generation is, but yes, I'm the same generation as one of your previous guests, Zulfi, who I really respect and admire. So yes, I'm that generation.
Cool. So one of the main purposes behind having this chat is there's, like we mentioned, as the COVID situation has kind of unraveled, we've kind of found ourselves in a situation where everybody's got social media, everybody's got WhatsApp, and you tend to find a lot of information is being shared, and it isn't always possible to verify and ask or even check whether that information is valid or not. And some of it just seems like people are kind of just making stuff up on the spot. But I've got a list of topics I want to run by you. And a lot of it is based on, obviously, I've seen that you've done quite a lot of good work in terms of obviously letting people know certain things are just pure myths and stuff. But I thought it'd be easy just to collate them all into one chat and let's just run over them. Let's just bust them out. So the first one it's about the masks. Now, it's a weird one because in any normal circumstance, like when you look back to like the smallpox, or when there's been the Spanish flu, or when there's been all sorts of other types of kind of viruses and outbreaks and stuff, it's kind of the norm. You'd see it in other parts of the world. You'd see people all masked up and it seems normal. But for some reason, when it's come round to the West and it's our turn, because we've got an outbreak or something, we have to wear a mask, suddenly there's like 1,000,001 questions, and it's all of a sudden it's like some kind of conspiracy theory around social control or this, that, the other. And I just want to know your thoughts. Are they effective or not? Or is there a bigger thing behind
them? I'm glad you actually mentioned the global trends and cultural differences in terms of mask wearing. So yes, there was a lot of resistance at first, and I think they have moved along. The debate has moved along, but it's still a bit controversial. It definitely improves, prevents, or should we say, reduces the risk of catching COVID. And it's actually the actual person who's infected, who's probably asymptomatic, who's got no symptoms, or even has COVID that doesn't know about it. They are significantly reducing the risk of passing it on to others. So that's how it protects you. So if, say, for example, I wear the mask and somebody's around me who's got COVID, that doesn't necessarily protect me 100%. However, if the person who's got the symptoms that person is making a statement that I am protecting others. Now, interestingly, if you look at, say, Japan, Taiwan, in the Far East, mask wearing is the norm. So if you've got any kind of cold virus or flu virus, you wear the mask because there's a general etiquette within society that I will not pass on my virus to others. And they say, the scientists argue, that has had a significant effect on reducing transmission rates of this virus. So the evidence was there from the Far East, as well as other measures as well. But mask wearing in itself was very, very helpful. And I wear it myself. It's given me tons of spots and problems with my skin, but I wear it. I wear it at work all the time, even when I'm talking to patients. So obviously, when I'm examining patients, you have to wear them. But for me, it's become the norm. But I can understand why people would feel it's restrictive. And last point is also, if you look at the Western values and cultural differences, for example, say in France, where they're extremely strict on any face covering, it is a bit of a shock, especially when you live in kind of a free liberal society. It's very hard to impose that.
Yeah, because I think one of the things was when people were kind of trying to make the argument against masks, they were trying to pitch or sell an argument about, authority or forcing you to do stuff, where you're kind of stumped because you don't know how to really politely say to people that, look, if authorities wanted us to really do something, I'm sure they could think of something a lot worse than making us wear a mask. Because I think all it's doing is, even when you see the kind of the models that they make where there's like respiratory droplets leaving the mouth, without the mask, it's a huge spread.
Absolutely. And again, even if you don't have the symptoms and you're talking, you are blowing out virus particles and virus into the actual atmosphere. You're creating a cloud of viruses which can actually linger in the air. And inadvertently, you might not know that, which is another reason why I find Liverpool interesting, where they've got this mass screening testing campaign to find out how many people, in terms of what proportion, are not symptomatic. And these are the people who could be spreading the virus. So, and masks do play a significant part. So yes, so when you're talking, you're sneezing, you've seen the images of before and after wearing a mask. So yes, the evidence is there. It's going to take time, and it's definitely understandable. I have some patients of mine who say, look, they find it suffocating. They think it's because they've got some kind of a lung disease and so on. It's difficult for them. And sometimes you just have to reassure them that your oxygen levels are not going to drop. It's more of a perception. And I'll always sort of guide them, say, look, wear it in the house where you're feeling comfortable, and then just gradually increase it. And if you look at, for example, in Australia, they've been extremely strict. They said, even if you leave your house to get to your car, you wear a mask. And they've nicknamed it the sort of ring steel around Melbourne, for example. And they've had a much better success where their policies have been introduced, like mask wearing, and the results are there for us all to see. They've had significantly fewer deaths and significantly fewer sort of transmission rates compared to us. Okay,
and then so now that we're talking about transmission rates and deaths, I'll just get right into the next question. So again, this is on the back of another like chain of WhatsApp messages that been going on in our community, but why is it affecting so many South Asian people, Pakistani, Indian, Bangladeshi people? It just seems to be, I say seems in air quotes, but the perception is that there's a lot that have been affected. And I believe there were some statistics to say that we do seem to be disproportionately affected. Is that the case, or?
It's absolutely the case. If you look at the Black, Asian, ethnic minorities, we've been disproportionately affected. Over a third of admissions in some areas have been Asian. When you look at our statistics in terms of our population, we're just a a few percent for percentage points. So yes, we have been affected disproportionately, and there's lots of reasons for this. If you want me to go into that, there are lots of reasons that have been cited. And one thing I found interesting, because at first I was thinking, is there a genetic link? But if you look at, for example, Pakistan, that's been a major success story in terms of, if you look at the countries that is surrounded by, say, Iran and China and India, where they've had very high rates. Why has Pakistan done so well? And there's been lots of reasons, but one of the reasons has been the polio campaigns and so on of the health workers, the outreach workers already there. So coming back to England, if you look at the Asian community, we work in sort of services roles where we are facing customers and patients. So you can say take doctors and nurses, taxi drivers, bus drivers, and so on. So we are constantly facing the community. Those are the type of roles that we've kind of taken on since our parents came. So that's one reason. Another reason is our living. Now, I have to say the way, say, especially Asian community live has been beautiful. It was actually praised by the former Home Secretary, Jack Straw, who said that the Asian family model is something that perhaps, and I'm not quoting him directly, but what he said was it's something that we should aspire towards, where we are looking after each other. So the families are very intricately linked to each other, and it's not just one household. It could be sort of 4 or 5 households where you're linked to each other and you're sharing your resources in order to conserve, because that's a mentality that was passed on by our parents. So you will share your car, you'll share even clothes and housing and certain, resources that you do that. So there was a powerful, intricate link there. And so when this virus came along, unfortunately, this was what the virus needed, this close sort of mixing, elder generation living with the younger generation. And that's been a fertile ground for this virus to spread very fast. So that was a sort of another reason as well. And I also think there is part of it is how detached we are as a society, as a community. One thing I find interesting is when there were the riots in, say, Burnley and Bradford, and when they launched an inquiry, and they found that the people, say the Asian community and the white community, English community, lead parallel lives, and we are quite detached. So there is a level of mistrust that's there out there, that thinking that this cannot be true, this is a conspiracy, and so on, and which I'm sure we'll get onto. And because of that, that was sort of what exacerbated the problem. And the last point I want to mention is our health. If you look at the Black and Asian community, we have higher rates of heart disease caused by, for example, diabetes. Obesity is a big problem as well, and that's because of the lower socioeconomic status. Where our community, the opportunities are significantly less compared to our counterparts. So this mixture of challenges has led to this rise in disproportionately high cases.
Okay, that's actually a very useful bit of information there, because that kind of leads into some of the aspects where the conspiracy theories were kind of trying to creep their way in. So there was people talking about so when people in the Asian community had corona, and they're saying that the doctors are they're doing DNR, so do not resuscitate orders on the Asian patients. Well, I mean, I don't want to have to ask you this question, but it is what it is. But what's your, like, have you seen that happen? Is there any explanation for anything like that, or?
It wouldn't really make sense. So DNAR, do not attempt resuscitation. And I'm just going to explain to you what that means in terms of, when you've got patients who have a DNAR in place, and what is that? So what they find is that if a patient is extremely sick with multi-organ failure, the kidneys are failing, the heart is failing, and the lungs are failing, etc. The question we ask is, if this patient's heart was to stop, what would be the benefit if we start compressing that chest aggressively just to get the heart beating again? What quality of life will they have? And how soon after will they potentially, have the same problem? And it's a miserable life when you do that. And then that's a question that you ask as clinicians, is that between nature and what humans can achieve, okay, what we can realistically achieve. And these decisions are not made on their own. These decisions are made as a team. So you've got your consultant, you've got your junior doctors, you've got nurses, and you've got relatives as well, where you have to make this decision. So that's where you decide, when to place that. However, if somebody's got that in place, the DNA of, that doesn't mean you stop treating them if they say, for example, have a chest infection or a urine infection or a skin condition. You still carry on treating their symptoms. It's only about, if the heart was to stop, do you let nature take its course, or do we continue pumping drugs inside them? That's a question. In terms of, in particular, your question about the Asian community, again, it is understandable. At the same time, it's regrettable as well. If they were doing that, if there was a case of them only targeting Asian patients, you can't keep that contained at all. It's not something that's isolated. Like, for example, Harold Shipman, when he was, what he was doing it in isolation on his own. There's no checks and balances, which is why the colleges changed the rules. In hospitals, it's impossible. Everything is documented, everything is monitored, and it's not the case at all. Nobody would ever be singled out. And it's not just the Asian community that have died. It's not within the Asian community where these feelings are flourishing, of they're thinking that they're out to get them. It's also in the English Caucasian community as well. And many sort of non-Asians have died as well in hospitals as well. So it's not the case that people are being chosen based on their skin color or race or religion. Absolutely not. We would be in a disaster situation if that ever was the case.
Well, brilliant. And I mentioned something before we started the podcast and got the ball rolling, and that was around somebody that I knew that needed treatment. And the reason I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about that is because what's actually been happening is a lot of fear has been created in the community now. And as a result of that fear, what's actually happening is a lot of the elder Asian parents are deliberately withholding information about their symptoms because they're scared that if something happens to me, they're going to take me away to the hospital and I'm never going to come back, because people are saying that they're just leaving people to die there. They're not resuscitating them. This and such a thing's happening. Like, someone very close to me recently had an infection in their tooth. It's a simple infection, but it kind of sat there and we were not told about it because there was a fear that, well, it'll be fine. So there was all manner of herbal remedies, garlic, cloves, everything like that just used. And it got to a point where the person's entire cheek kind of swelled up. And at this point, we're like, look, what's happened? What's happened? Like, we need to get on it. So we're going to the dentist, got some antibiotics and so forth. And now things are on the mend. But that was just in the nick of time. Had it been left any longer, it could have been a lot worse. And then on top of that, we also know someone that was on the brink of death because, and this person actually got corona. He's an elder gentleman, a friend of the family, quite close. But he didn't really play up his symptoms until it was really late on, just because of the fear that we have in our community now that, if you go to the hospital, you're not going to come back. And it's just, I'll be honest with you, it just made me really angry because God forbid, but what if there's people out there that have actually passed away because they haven't been able to get treatment in time because they've been withholding information because they're just scared?
Bash, I'm going to be frank with you. Sadly, we have lost people because they were scared, because of the fear that they had. And when you mention cases like that, these tragic cases, it makes me glad that I am actually talking to you today. So taking you to the hospital is not something that we want. We prefer to treat people within their own houses. That's the first thing. And to give you a bit of background, the rates of cancer diagnoses have dropped. That's not because people have suddenly not got cancer. That's not the case, or heart disease. Is that people have a fear of approaching any clinician, any hospital, because they have this fear of catching the coronavirus. And this is something I've just heard for the first time from yourself, where they feel that they're going to, get them admitted and harm them. To reassure you, that's not the case. Absolutely not. So, for example, when you are having the first conversation with your doctor, whether it's face-to-face or through a teleconsultation, our aim is not to get you admitted. the vast majority, to give you an idea, over 90% of most medical conditions can be handled within primary care. Okay, it's just the few that you have to send across. And remember, if you, for example, present early, we can treat it early. That reduces your chances of ever needing to go to hospital. If you do get to hospital, they are very strict. So when they're strict, what that means is that they don't allow extra family members to enter the emergency department, again, to reduce the risk. If, say, for example, a paramedic or ambulance crew arrive, it's just the patient alone. And if, for example, a parent needs to accompany a child, the parent wears a mask. All these are measures put in place to prevent a spread of COVID. And so far, we've not had any cases of COVID being spread, because that was the biggest reason why patients were not presenting, because they have this fear. I had somebody who fell down a full flight of stairs with his shoulder, he could not move his arm. And it took at least 25 minutes to talk to him to say, look, all you're doing is going for the x-ray with your mask, and then you can come back home again. Just want to make sure that you haven't fractured anything. So just remember, to reassure you, that's not what we're doing. We want to make sure that you're treated in your house as much as possible. If you do have to go to hospital, the measures are in place to make sure that you are safe, as well as the clinicians and the staff are safe. And the reason why we have the lockdown is to make sure that there's no extra pressure on hospitals, so that when you do, say, God forbid, you have to go to hospital, we can look after you for the best of our abilities, and we are not having to decide who's going to get treated first. So to reassure you, that's not the case. And say the example that you gave of the tooth abscess, again, sometimes it's a simple case of antibiotics if you act early, and we can treat it, and then you don't have to have the complications and suffering pain on your own. If you're ever in doubt, make the first appointment with your GP if it's something that that can be managed. But if you're really struggling, if you think you're having a heart attack or having something serious happening like stroke, and I'm sure many people are aware of the symptoms and signs, do not ever hesitate to call an ambulance, because your life is more important.
Thank you for that. That's very useful information. And again, I think it kind of reiterates that point about you're going to go to, say, seek medical assistance, but it's not in the medical staff's best interest to waste your time either, because there's just that many people to see. But another area that I wanted to kind of touch on was the vaccine is in development. I say we don't know when it's going to be available, but I think it's more of a race at the moment, because different people are at different stages with it at the moment. But even now, and this time it's not even like specifically for the Asian community, but just generally, I've noticed there's quite a lot of people that kind of already saying that I would never have it, I'd never do it, and so forth. And I just want to know, what are your thoughts on the vaccine itself once it's out there, and would you get one? Would you take one?
So yes, there's over 200 different vaccines that are being investigated throughout the world. And a few have come forward, and they're moving into the final stages, and what we call is different phases of their trials. And the best phase to find out whether the vaccine is going to work is a phase 3 trial, for example. And the one that we're hopeful of is the Oxford AstraZeneca sort of vaccine, where they're hoping to introduce it as early as possible, but that doesn't mean that they compromise safety. In some ways, it's been a sad outcome of this, is that the media often gets the story first, and the clinicians have to catch up and thinking, what are you talking about? For example, there was a recent story about the GPs are going to be administering this vaccine in December, and we're looking at ourselves like, who signed up for this? That's the hope. So what happens is they go through rigorous testing. Again, unfortunately, it's become jingoistic. Nationalism's taken place. So Russia and China are thinking we want to be the first one. It was like the race for the first man on the moon. And yes, they have their own standards, and I'm not going to comment on that too much. But living in the West, we do have extremely high standards. When other vaccines are developed, such as the flu vaccine, that took many years. But however, technology has advanced. Now you can create sequences and have these sort of vaccines out in much shorter space of time. So it's a race to make sure that it's safe. And that's why you go through these trials. That's why volunteers are asked in terms of whether they want to volunteer to test it on them, because they're generally healthy as well, and they are monitored very closely. And then what happens is the whole point of it is to generate your own immune system. Again, some of the questions I get is, are they giving you the virus to? It's not the virus, it's the what mimics the virus as well. So having said that, all that is that you have to make sure everything's safe. Yes, in terms of answer to your question, I would have to look at the data. So when they release this, again, I don't even have the data. Even the head of Oxford trials says, I don't even know if it's going to be available before Christmas or during the December time. But everybody just needs to look at the data, and then we will make the decision. Personally, I'm interested whether I've had the virus first. If I've got the antibodies, then I won't have the vaccine. But if I haven't got the antibodies, I will have a look at the data, study it, and then make my own decision. And I am confident in our scientific community that they're going to produce something that is, as effective as possible. But remember, when you take the flu vaccine, that also has potential side effects. People, the minority, do have a reaction, but again, it's something that's accepted. When you're a child, you go through the diphtheria, tetanus, and MMR jabs all the time. Again, some very, very few get a reaction to it, but then again, overall, society has accepted that, and it's going to be the same for this vaccine as well. So be assured that the testing is there and the checks and protocols are in place.
No, that sounds reassuring, because again, I know I keep going back to the WhatsApp messages and the chain mails and all that kind of information, but it's key because that's where a lot of people who are even watching this episode, they no doubt will be getting these messages as well. And it's just, I work in the testing industry, but mine is more in the information technology sector. And I'm well aware of just how stringently we have to check stuff, quite literally, make sure things do what they're supposed to do, and things are within tolerances of what they're supposed to do. And I can only imagine just how much more, severe and stricter it is going to be for something as like a vaccine. So I guess it's just about giving people assurances. It's not to say that we're shilling for the big pharmaceutical companies or anything, but we're being realistic, I think is the best way to put it. But, with regards to like the conversation that we're having now, we're about half an hour in thereabouts, but is there anything that's on your mind, anything that you also want to cover, or any tidbits that you want to share that might help put the community at ease, especially with regards to the chain mails and the WhatsApp messages we keep receiving?
Yeah, sometimes I wonder whether we should ban WhatsApp or make people wear masks, which is safer from there. And again, in my own family, I get sent a lot of WhatsApp messages and so on. It's very important and I know suspicion's very high, and some of the reasons is because people's livelihoods are being affected. You could be a taxi driver, you could be sending your young children to schools, and again, all of a sudden, your business is collapsing around you, and that anger then feeds into that suspicion that, hang on, I'm fit and healthy, why am I paying the price for this as well? And I know it can feel like that, and people like myself have been accused of whether I'm a government agent or if I'm being paid for this, and I'm not being paid a penny. And my own family have been affected with COVID-19 as well. And to give you an example, I was speaking to one of my colleagues. Again, he's the one who also produced a video about his COVID-19 infection. He's a GP who was severely affected. And he said throughout his life, he's had viruses. He's never had a virus this bad. It just floored him. He's got loss of energy. 50% of his lung was destroyed with this virus. And one thing that worries me is the long COVID. And what that means is the after effects of this, where you're going to have some level of lung damage. And by the way, I'm not telling to scare people. I'm just making people, I'm putting into context as why I've been repeating the same message. So the symptoms, again, are coming through, such as poor concentration, aches and pains in the body, breathing problems, even once the virus has left your body as well. This is something I never saw with other viruses, such as the flu virus. This is something that seems to be unique to this deadly virus as well. And that's the reason why I've kept producing my messages and videos as well. So please have faith in us. We're not out to end livelihoods like that. For me, lives are more important than anything. And I think part of my experiences from the refugee camps, working in war zones, where the ultimate survival is to save your life, to protect your life before anything else. And I know it's a bit of an illusion around here. There's no bombs raining down on us and there's no one attacking us, but at the same time, life just suddenly seems to stop. But I can assure you the hospitals are full. And they are creating extra wards now to house people. We get daily statistics of how many people have been admitted with COVID-19. The healthcare staff are suffering with depression. Every other consultation of mine at work is about a nurse in depression because of all the deaths that's, and the suffering that she sees on the wards and so on. So I do see the other end of it, you see. But again, I can't always constantly tell people, or we can't constantly tell people that this is what's happening. But it's like a war zone. And some people think it might be melodramatic to say that, but it literally is the case. And I'm really sorry if it offends some people with the messages I give out. But when you see people losing their loved ones, when I'm talking to patients who've just lost their husband or wife in the hospital, it becomes very, very difficult for me to just stay silent. So please have this trust in us. We will get through this. This virus is going to stay with us for a while, and I'm not going to give that false reassurance. However, treatment is improving significantly. That's why our death rates are a lot lower compared to earlier in March, where the way we manage patients, it's significantly improving. And so, for example, we're looking into prednisolone, we're looking into aspirin, and so on. These are just trials, and this is something that we're trialing, but the race is on. So stick with it. Please try and stay united. And if there's anything I say to offend people, if there's anything that you find uncomfortable, please do talk to me. But my intentions are just to save lives.
I just want to say on the back of that, thank you very much. I think based on the fact that you've seen, the effects of it, you deal with patients day in, day out, and unfortunately you have had to deal with people that have died as well. I think I admire your patience with it, because I don't think I'd have the patience to be as polite about it, because you're on the front lines for it. So I do appreciate you taking this time out to talk to us today about it. But for the benefit of the people that are watching or listening, we're keeping it short to this length, and the idea is as the situation evolves, we're just gonna keep catching up and chatting again. That's the beauty of this format. It's just easier just to work with the science as it evolves and updates. And obviously, we can even have a separate chat all about the lockdown measures and how effective they are as well, without getting into politics sometime as well. So I really appreciate you having that conversation with me today, Doctor.
Thank you for having me, and it's been an honor and privilege to get my message across.
Cool.